Chapter 37, Continued. Her thumb hovered over the screen, but she couldn't bring herself to type. Her body shook, mascara streaking her cheeks as tears fell freely. The room seemed to press in around her, the walls closing in, suffocating her. And then, almost as if mocking her, the note on the table caught her eye again. The words scrawled across the front, "Will you go out with me?" Yes/no seemed to pulse, demanding her attention. Karen pushed herself up from the chair, her legs unsteady, and moved to the sink. Karen clung to the counter, the cold steel biting into her palms. The weight of powerlessness settled on Karen's chest like chains forged from her own failures. It pressed against her ribs, making each breath a struggle. But beneath the crushing despair, something raw and volatile began to burn, a fury so fierce it threatened to consume her. It wasn't fear that clung to her now, it was rage, simmering and molten, waiting for an outlet. For the first time in her life, Karen felt genuinely powerless, and she hated it. Chapter 38, July 11th, 2000, 1:27 a.m. Time to stop him. Karen perched on the edge of her couch, the dim light from a single desk lamp casting long, uneven shadows across her apartment. The silence wasn't just quiet, it was oppressive, curling around her like smoke, heavy and toxic. The refrigerator hummed faintly, the sound far too loud in the vacuum of her solitude, each cycle an irritating tick in the back of her mind. Her flip phone sat on the coffee table, the dark screen an accusation, its faint glow highlighting a list of missed calls she couldn't bring herself to answer. She had tried to sleep, even closing her eyes and pretending that her shaking body wasn't betraying her, but the echoes of John Doe's voice, the cold press of the tinfoil hat against her scalp, and the haunting white eyes of those 7 figures danced in her mind like a grotesque carousel. Karen's gaze flicked between her flip phone and the folded note on the coffee table. Ashley's name glared back from the missed calls list, each unanswered ring a silent accusation. But it wasn't the phone that held her attention. It was the note, its sharp edges and childlike scrawl exuding a menace that made her skin crawl. Something inside her told her she needed help. She picked it up, flipping through her call log to Ashley's name. Her thumb hovered over the call button before she pressed it. The line rang out, unanswered. She tried again, but still no response. Gabe, steady, kind Gabe, had sent her a text. "If you need anything, call us." A faint, bitter smile touched her lips. It was so perfectly him. She could picture him, sitting there with his ancient phone, painstakingly punching out the message, each letter a labor of care. Karen's thumb hovered over his name in her call log. She didn't want to pull him into this, but the alternative, being alone with her thoughts, felt unbearable. She pressed the button, the line ringing twice before a groggy voice answered, "Karen?" Gabe sounded startled but quickly awake, his concern cutting through the static in her head. "I need—" Her voice wavered, and she took a deep breath to steady it. "Can you come over?" "I'll be there in 15, he replied without hesitation. Her stomach tightened as the memory of John's smirk flashed through her mind, calm, calculated, and dripping with malice. When he slid the folded note across the table, it wasn't just a taunt, it was a promise, a dark thread tying her to his game. The paper sat untouched, its sharp creases gleaming faintly in the lamp's dim light, as if daring her to open it. She could almost hear its ticking, each second stretching her fraying nerves thinner. The knock shattered the fragile quiet, jerking Karen from her spiral of thoughts. When she opened the door, Gabe stood there, his disheveled hair and hastily thrown-on jacket revealing the urgency of her call. "Karen," he said, his eyes scanning her face. "What happened?" Before she could answer, another knock interrupted them. Karen stepped back as Gabe opened the door, revealing Ashley, who looked uncharacteristically disheveled. His usually crisp suit was rumpled, his shirt untucked, and a cigarette dangled loosely from his fingers. "I got your message, Gabe, thanks. Ashley said, stepping inside and shutting the door behind him. You look like hell, he said, directing his gaze to Karen. Thanks, she replied dryly, her voice strained. Glad to know I'm radiating confidence. Ashley's smirk faltered as he caught the tremor in her hands. He exchanged a look with Gabe, their unspoken concern palpable. Tell us everything, Gabe said, his tone gentle but insistent. Karen hesitated, her arms crossing protectively over her chest. Her voice was quiet when she finally spoke, but it carried the weight of her fear. They came here, Karen said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes darted to the folded note on the coffee table as if it might spring to life. John Doe and the others, they were here, in my home. Karen's words hung in the air like smoke, choking the room with tension. Gabe and Ashley exchanged a glance, the weight of her statement sinking in. Ashley was the first to break the silence. All of them. His voice was sharp, disbelieving, but there was an edge of fear underneath it. Karen nodded, her fingers twisting together. Patrick, Tony, Riley, Jamie, Devin, and Daniel. Their eyes, they weren't normal. Black like they were blind, but they weren't. They saw everything. Gabe moved toward the couch, his steps slow, deliberate. And John? He asked quietly, his blue eyes fixed on her. Karen swallowed hard, her throat dry. He was different, calm, almost playful. But it wasn't normal, it was calculated. He knew exactly what he was doing. She trailed off, her gaze drifting to the folded note on the coffee table. He left that. Gabe followed her eyes and bent to pick it up. His fingers hovered over the paper, the air between them electric with tension. You didn't open it? He asked. No, Karen said quickly, shaking her head. I couldn't. Probably smart, Ashley muttered, leaning against the wall and taking a long drag from his cigarette. If John's losing it, who knows what's in there? Karen's shoulders tensed. He's not losing it. He's in control. Every word, every movement, it was all deliberate. He even put a tinfoil hat on me, like it was some kind of joke. Ashley let out a low whistle. A tinfoil hat? That's a new level of crazy. It wasn't a joke to him, Karen snapped, her voice rising. He's playing some game and we're all just pieces on his board. Gabe stepped in, his tone calm but firm. Karen, we believe you. We're going to figure this out. Karen hesitated, her gaze darting between the two men. And what about the precinct? The case? The files? She didn't even realize her knees had buckled until her legs gave out beneath her. The adrenaline drained from her system all at once, like a dam breaking. Her muscles trembled, her stomach turned cold, and a wave of dizziness hit her hard enough to steal her breath. Her vision blurred at the edges as the room had just tilted off its axis. Ashley moved first. In a blink, he was at her side, catching her just before she collapsed fully. His arms wrapped around her with surprising gentleness, steadying her as he lowered her to sit on the edge of the couch. Easy now, he murmured, voice low and rough but steady. It's just your body shutting the fear down. Happens to the best of us. Karen clutched at his sleeve, her breathing ragged. She hated the weakness, hated that he was seeing it. But Ashley didn't let go. He crouched in front of her, hands still gripping her shoulders. Look at me, Karen. You're safe now, you hear me? His tone softened, just enough. You don't have to carry all of it tonight. Her eyes filled, but the tears didn't fall. Not yet. Instead, she nodded once, her jaw clenched like a vice, and Ashley pulled her into a brief, firm hug. No words, no frills, just an anchor. When he pulled back, he rested a hand on her back, giving Gabe a glance over her shoulder. You're not staying here, Gabe said, his voice brooking no argument. Pack a bag. You can stay at my place. Ashley nodded, flicking ash into a nearby tray. Gabe's right. You're too exposed here. If they came once, they'll come again. We'll handle it, Gabe said firmly. Right now, you need to be somewhere safe. Ashley added, his voice softer than usual. We can't help anyone if something happens to you. She exhaled shakily, her resistance crumbling under their combined insistence. Fine, give me 10 minutes. Karen disappeared into her bedroom, leaving Gabe and Ashley standing in the living room. Gabe sat on the couch, the folded note still in his hand. He turned it over, his thumb tracing the sharp creases. You think it's a trap? Gabe asked, his voice low. Ashley leaned back, his cigarette smoldering between his fingers as he released a slow, deliberate stream of smoke. It's John Doe and knowing everything we have worked on the last few months, he said, his voice dry but laced with an edge of unease. The whole damn thing is a trap. The question is, do we spring it, or does it spring us? When Karen returned, a small overnight bag slung over her shoulder, Gabe stood and tucked the note into his jacket pocket. Let's go, he said, his tone resolute. The drive to Gabe's apartment was quiet, the weight of the situation pressing down on all three of them. Karen sat in the passenger seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, while Ashley lounged in the back, his head resting against the window. You doing okay? Gabe asked, glancing at Karen. She didn't answer right away, her gaze fixed on the darkened streets outside. I've faced danger before, I've been scared before, but this... Her voice broke and she inhaled sharply, forcing herself to continue. This is something else, like I'm trapped in a game where I don't know the rules. You don't have to do this alone, Gabe said gently. We're in this together. Karen gave him a small, grateful smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. When they arrived at Gabe's apartment, he ushered them inside, flicking on the lights. The space was modest but comfortable, a reflection of Gabe's unassuming personality. Books lined the shelves and a worn leather couch faced a small TV. Make yourself at home, Gabe said, setting Karen's bag on the couch. Karen sank into the cushions, her shoulders slumping as the tension began to ease. Ashley grabbed a chair from the kitchen and sat across from her, his cigarette replaced by a toothpick he rolled between his fingers. We need to talk about that note, Gabe said, pulling it from his pocket and setting it on the coffee table. Karen stared at it, her stomach twisting. Do we have to do it tonight? Ashley arched a brow. You'd rather leave it a mystery? Karen's jaw tightened. Fine, but I'm not touching it. You're not seriously leaving that untouched, are you? Gabe quipped. His attempt at levity met with a dry, time and place, Gabe, time and place, from Ashley. Even Karen cracked a faint smile, the humor a brief reprieve from the suffocating tension. Gabe unfolded the note carefully, the paper crackling in the silence. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the page, then froze. What the hell? His voice trailed off, his expression shifting from wary to perplexed. Ashley leaned forward. What is it? Gabe turned the paper, angling it so Karen and Ashley could see. Instead of a taunt or threat, the page was covered in uneven scrawls and riddles. His throat felt tight as he read it aloud, his voice steady despite the unease coiling in his gut. Gabe's voice broke through the tense silence as he read the first riddle aloud. I stand among giants, but you won't find me in parks, where the wealthy rise high, reaching up to the stars. I'm near a number, both odd and prime, a street that whispers luxury, wealth, and time. Which road do I dwell on, known for the rich, where glass towers glisten and fortunes do hitch? Ashley leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, a smirk tugging at his lips. Sounds like Billionaire's Row to me. Central Park South fits the Giants bit, but it's not in the park. Karen's brow furrowed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Isn't that the place the ever-so-polite doorman asked you guys to leave? What's the connection? We're not done yet, Gabe said, carefully unfolding the paper further. The next riddle stared back at him, scrawled in the same uneven handwriting. My uncle sails the seas, his rank quite clear. He commands the waves without a trace of fear. Yet I stay on land where adventure still calls, known by a name that one might hear in hallowed halls. I'm not his daughter, yet family indeed, a generation apart, his care I heed. So who am I to the man who wears the captain's braid? A bond of family by a different grade. Karen's eyes widened slightly, the pieces clicking into place. That's a niece. It's someone connected to a captain, family but not a daughter. Gabe nodded, jotting the answer in his notebook. The theme seems to be relationships, locations, and connections. Let's see what's next. He unfolded the note further, revealing the third riddle. I'm a purchase of moments, a brief delay. 2 silver tokens grant me more time to stay. A spin of gears or a slot that clicks. The answer lies in a simple trick. What am I buying with just $50 for her to linger longer without a holler? Parking meter, Ashley said almost immediately, his tone dry. And they say chivalry's dead. Karen glanced at him, her lips twitching into a faint smile despite the weight pressing on her. You're quick. I'm not just a pretty face, Ashley quipped, tapping his temple. But what's the relevance? Gabe frowned, his pen pausing mid-note. Time. It's all about time. These riddles aren't random, they're pointing to something, but I can't figure out what. Karen exhaled slowly, the sound heavy with resignation as she sank deeper into the couch. She didn't know what she expected to be on that note, but each word Gabe read tightened the knot in her stomach. That can't be it, she murmured, her voice tight with unease. She hesitated before asking, Is there more? Gabe frowned, turning the note over carefully, his fingers tracing its edges. He unfolded another section, his expression darkening. Ashley, noticing the shift in his demeanor, leaned forward. Well, he prompted. When he finally read the fourth riddle, his voice was lower, almost reverent, as if speaking the words would summon something dark. 3 once stood where shadows crawl, pillars of fate, guardians of all. 1 lies still, earth his shroud, a presence lost, though memories are loud. 2 still guide lost souls in the night, their destined meeting cloaked from sight. Yet all will fall, their cycle foretold, even the strongest pillars crumble, cold. Who are these watchers, bound by fate's thread, 2 who endure, and 1 who is already dead? The words seemed to thicken the air, each line adding a weight that pressed on Karen's chest. Pillars, she whispered, the word catching in her throat. It has to mean something, something bigger than us. Ashley nodded slowly. 2 still guiding, 1 gone. Sounds like it could mean us? Gabe's head snapped up, his expression grim. Or it's John's warped way of describing his 7. He thinks he's a goddamn architect of reality. Karen swallowed hard. And what does he mean by all will fall? Let's hope we don't find out, Ashley said, his voice hard. Gabe carefully unfolded the last section of the note. Ashley, pointing to the back of the note, Look, turn it over. There is 1 last one. Gabe flipped the paper over. The writing was surrounded by scrawled ha 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 in uneven loops, the chaotic energy spilling across the page. He read the 5th and final riddle. I'm often kept hidden, a secret untold, but sometimes ego makes me bold. I whisper my schemes to those who oppose, revealing my moves, the highs and the lows, not out of kindness nor mercy's hand, but to show the depth of how I command. The clever may listen, the brave may dare, but none can stop what I prepare. What am I, shared in arrogance and spite, a plot unveiled before the final fight? A confession, Karen murmured, her voice barely audible. Or a taunt. Ashley's jaw tightened. He's telling us what he's doing, but not why. It's like he wants us to follow him. Because he thinks he's invincible, Gabe said, setting the unfolded note on the coffee table. His hand trembled slightly as he pulled away. This isn't just a game to him, it's a statement. Karen's eyes lingered on the note, the uneven scrawl seared into her mind. He's not just leading us, she murmured. He's toying with us. These riddles, they're breadcrumbs to something bigger. They're a path. And the destination? Ashley asked, his voice cold. Karen's gaze flicked to the first riddle. Billionaire's Row, she said quietly. That's where it starts. Ashley crossed his arms, his face a mask of frustration. He's baiting us. Then let's take the bait, Gabe said, his voice steely. We're not letting him stay one step ahead. The room fell into a heavy silence as the implications settled over them. Karen's shoulders slumped, exhaustion tugging at every fiber of her being. She looked up at Gabe and Ashley, her eyes glassy. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing me." Ashley leaned back, his gaze softening. "We're in this together, Karen. Always." Gabe nodded, his expression firm. "We'll figure this out, one step at a time." Karen's lips trembled into a faint smile, the warmth of their solidarity cutting through her despair. But as she glanced at the chaotic scrawls on the note, the shadows of doubt crept back into her mind. John wasn't just toying with them, he was pulling the strings of something far more significant, and they were running out of time to stop him. Chapter 39, July 11th, 2000, 8:07 a.m. Time bled away. The morning sunlight sliced through the slatted blinds, casting fractured lines across the wreckage of the night before. The living room was a battlefield of sleepless hours, scribbled notes abandoned mid-thought, coffee mugs stained with the ghosts of overuse, and maps riddled with frantic pinholes. The air was thick with the mingling sense of burnt coffee, cold sweat, and something heavier, lingering adrenaline that refused to fade. Ashley lay sprawled across the sagging couch, one arm draped over the edge like a marionette with its strings cut, his snores a slow, rhythmic counterpoint to the unnatural quiet. Karen, curled in a blanket on the love seat, looked anything but at rest. Even in sleep, tension etched itself into her face, her brows twitching as if she were fighting battles behind closed eyes. Across the room, Gabe leaned against the kitchenette counter, his second cup of coffee lukewarm in his grip. The bitter taste did nothing to dull the gnawing unease coiling in his gut. He exhaled slowly, watching the steam curl and disappear, much like the answers they'd spent all night chasing. The microwave clock blinked 8:07 a.m., a new day, but it felt like the last one had never ended. Ashley groaned as he shifted, blinking against the fragmented sunlight slicing through the blinds. "Please tell me it's tomorrow," he muttered, his voice a rasp of exhaustion, "because today's been going on for about 3 days already." "More like today still," Gabe replied, his tone flat. He set his mug down and leaned against the counter. "We need to head to the precinct, pick up the pictures and anything else we left behind." Ashley nodded, swinging his legs off the couch. "Yeah, and we need to figure out how to recreate the board at your place. We'll work better if we've got the full picture, literally." Karen stirred, opening her eyes and blinking at them blearily. "You're leaving?" "We won't be gone long," Gabe assured her. "You'll be safe here. Lock the door behind us. We'll bring lunch back." Karen sat up, running a hand through her tangled hair. "I'll be fine. Just be careful." Ashley gave her a faint smile, grabbing his jacket. "Careful's my middle name." Gabe shot him a look. "Let's go before you start lying to her." The precinct was its usual hive of activity, officers and staff moving with purpose amid the steady hum of printers and phones. Gabe and Ashley slipped in unnoticed, heading straight to the evidence board that had been the center of their world for weeks. "In daylight, it's just strings and tacks," Ashley muttered, his hands on his hips. "But last night, it felt like staring into a goddamn black hole." "Don't kid yourself," Gabe muttered. "It's still a mess of threads we can't untangle." Ashley grabbed a stack of photos from the corner of the desk and began packing them into a folder. "Karen's idea to bring this back to your place was solid. We'll need every piece if we're going to figure out what the hell John's playing at." Gabe was silent, his fingers tracing the edges of a note pinned to the board. The riddles replayed in his mind, their cryptic clues digging under his skin like splinters. "You're quiet," Ashley remarked, glancing over. "Just thinking," Gabe replied, pulling the note free and tucking it into his jacket pocket. "The riddles. John's not just toying with us, he's leading us somewhere." Ashley raised an eyebrow. "You sound like you're starting to understand his crazy." Gabe exhaled sharply. Maybe I am, and that scares the hell out of me. Before Ashley could respond, Captain Marshall's voice cut through the din. Gabe, Ashley, my office, now. The detectives exchanged a glance before trailing Captain Marshall into his office. The door shut behind them with a firm click, the sound unnaturally loud in the confined space. The walls, lined with commendations and stiff, unsmiling portraits, seemed to press inward, adding to the weight already hanging between them. Marshall settled against the edge of his desk, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. His office, as always, was stripped of anything unnecessary, a few neatly stacked files, a steaming mug of coffee, and a handful of framed photos positioned with careful precision. One showed him shaking hands with a local official, another captured a candid moment with fellow officers outside the precinct, but it was the third that caught Ashley's eye. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, an unspoken reminder that time was running out. Ashley dropped into the nearest chair with a heavy sigh, slouching in a way that was both deliberate and dismissive. Gabe, however, remained standing, hands shoved deep into his pockets. The exhaustion of the previous night sat between them like an uninvited guest, and neither was in the mood for a lecture. I hear you're packing up the board, Marshall began, his voice calm but edged with authority. Gabe nodded, his voice clipped. The office is a no-go. Too many eyes, too many hands ready to yank this case out from under us if we're not careful. Marshall's gaze shifted to Ashley. And Karen? Last I heard, she was still at the apartment and not taking calls, Ashley lied, keeping his cards close to his chest. He didn't want anyone to know where she was. The captain's brow furrowed. Look, I don't want to pile on, but Karen's suspension complicates things. Until the investigation clears her, Kayla will be assisting you two. Kayla? Ashley let out a short, derisive laugh. She couldn't lead a flashlight through a power outage, let alone fill Karen's shoes. Marshall's expression hardened. She's what you've got, and she knows the system better than most. Use her expertise. Ashley's gaze flicked to a framed photo on the captain's bookshelf, nestled between commendations and department awards. It was small and easy to overlook, but something about it snagged his attention. His posture stiffened, and before he could think twice, he crossed the room and picked it up. He turned the frame over in his hands, studying the image. A young woman stood beside a sleek sailboat, poised and self-assured, her smile radiating confidence and control, the kind of person who knew exactly what she wanted and how to get it. Your daughter or girlfriend? Ashley asked casually, lifting the frame just enough for Marshall to see. The captain hesitated, the briefest flicker of something crossing his face before he shook his head. My niece. She's all the family I've got left. Been trying to be a father figure since my brother passed, years ago. His voice was steady, but there was a weight beneath it, one Ashley didn't miss. Ashley lingered on the photo a moment longer before carefully placing it back on the shelf. She's beautiful. What's she up to now? Marshall's expression softened, the faintest trace of pride breaking through his usual stoicism. Michelle, he said, his tone carrying an edge of warmth. Smart kid, driven, talks about running for mayor one day. Across the room, Gabe and Ashley exchanged a quick glance, a silent message passing between them. John Doe's riddle echoed in their minds, its meaning suddenly sharpening into focus. I'm not his daughter, yet family indeed, a generation apart, his care I heed. The room seemed to grow colder, the ticking clock suddenly loud in the silence. Marshall noticed their exchange and frowned. What's on your minds? Gabe forced a casual tone. Just thinking about family, it's a nice photo. Marshall's gaze lingered on them for a moment longer, suspicion flickering in his eyes, but he let it go, stepping back to his desk. If there's nothing else, get moving. I need results yesterday. Yes, sir, Ashley said, his tone clipped as he grabbed the packed folder from the desk. As they exited the office, Ashley glanced over his shoulder at the captain one last time, the framed photo now a glaring clue in the puzzle they were piecing together. Back in the bullpen, Gabe leaned against his desk, His hands braced on the edge as he stared at the floor. Michelle Lewis, Gabe muttered, the name tasting bitter in his mouth. A leader driven by ambition, destined to consume everything in her path. She fits the profile too perfectly. Ashley nodded, setting the folder down. No doubt about it, but we can't let Marshall know we're onto her, not yet. Agreed, Gabe said, straightening. Let's get back to Karen. She needs to know. Ashley hesitated, his gaze drifting toward the door. You think she's ready for this? She's been through hell. She'll handle it, Gabe replied, his voice firm. She has to. The precinct door banged shut, the metallic clang cutting through the thick, already warm morning air. The city was awake but groggy, its breath heavy with exhaust, steam, and yesterday's heat that never quite left. A low haze clung to the sidewalks, rising from manholes and curling along the edges of buildings. Shirts clung to damp skin, and the distant rumble of traffic mixed with the rhythmic hiss of buses, the world grinding into motion beneath a sky that promised another scorcher. They didn't speak. The weight of what they'd uncovered pressed heavier than the heat ever could. Neither spoke as they walked toward Gabe's car, the tension thick between them, unspoken but undeniable. Ashley flicked open his lighter, the brief flare of flame casting sharp shadows across his face. He took a slow, deliberate drag, exhaling a thin ribbon of smoke that drifted skyward, lost to the pale morning light. So, what's the play? Ashley's voice was low, roughened by exhaustion and nicotine. As he spoke, he shoved a box of string, photos, and folders into the back of Gabe's car, the contents shifting with a dull thud. Gabe didn't hesitate. We go to Karen. She needs to know. Then we figure out how to get to Michelle without tipping off Marshall. His eyes stayed locked ahead, his jaw tight. Ashley nodded, tapping Ash onto the pavement. She's sharp. If she's involved, if she's part of John Doe's game, she'll see us coming. He exhaled slowly, watching the smoke twist before it disappeared. And if that's the case, we're already behind. Gabe clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. Then we don't give her a reason to see us. We play dumb, stick to the shadows, and figure out what she's hiding. As they climbed into the car, the silence stretched between them, broken only by the rhythmic thrum of the engine as Gabe started it up. Neither man spoke, their thoughts racing as they pieced together the puzzle that was rapidly unfolding around them. When they arrived at Gabe's apartment, Karen was already pacing the living room. She was still in the same clothes as the day before, her hair disheveled and dark circles under her eyes. The sight of her so uncharacteristically vulnerable twisted something in Gabe's chest. You're back, she said, her voice hoarse. What did you find? Gabe set the folders and box of photos and strings down on the coffee table, motioning for her to sit. Ashley leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, the cigarette still dangling from his fingers. We need to talk, Gabe began, his voice steady but underscored with a gravity that made Karen's stomach twist. It's about Michelle Lewis. Karen's breath caught, her gaze snapping to Gabe. Michelle? She repeated, her voice trembling. You're not saying what I think you're saying. Gabe hesitated, glancing at Ashley before continuing. She's Marshall's niece, and we think she's one of them, one of John Doe's 7. Karen's face paled, her hand gripping the edge of the couch for support. You're sure? Ashley nodded, his expression grim. Fits the riddle, and the files. Everything points to her. Karen sank onto the couch, her hands pressing against her temples as if she could physically stop the world from spinning out of control. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. How much worse does this get? We'll figure it out, Gabe said, his voice steady. But we need to be careful. If Marshall's protecting her, this could get messy. Karen looked up, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. What do we do now? Ashley pushed off the wall, stubbing out his cigarette in an empty coffee cup. We do what we always do. We dig, and when we find the truth, we use it. Karen nodded slowly, her fingers gripping the edge of the couch like a lifeline. If she's part of this, we have to stop her. Then let's get to work. The three of them sat around the kitchen table, the folders spread open between them. Maps, photographs, and notes were scattered across the surface, each piece a fragment of the larger puzzle they were trying to solve. The atmosphere was tense but focused, their shared determination a silent pact. As the sun rose higher in the sky, the weight of their discovery pressed down on them, but so did the resolve to see it through. Together they would uncover the truth, no matter what it cost. The faint ticking of a clock echoed through the room, each passing second carving deeper into their resolve. The question lingered unspoken. Would they find the answers before time bled away? Chapter 40. July 12, 2000, 10:45 a.m. I found it. The kitchen had transformed into a tactical command center in disguise. Coffee mugs drained to exhaustion and formed a chaotic perimeter along the counter, their faint rings like battle scars etched into the surface. The refrigerator hummed in rebellion against the turmoil, its monotonous rhythm battling for dominance against the discordant shuffle of papers and maps plastering every wall. Gabe's apartment, always bordering on cluttered, now felt claustrophobic, a labyrinth of evidence and desperation, its walls closing in with every unanswered question. The faint smell of stale takeout lingered, mixing with the sharp tang of ink and glue from the materials they'd scavenged to recreate their evidence wall. Ashley stood back, arms crossed tightly over his chest, his dark eyes scanning the chaos with a mixture of frustration and suspicion. The low light cast shadows across his face, making the lines of exhaustion stand out starkly. His voice cut through the silence like a knife. "I thought you said there was nothing in the files," he said, each word deliberate and heavy. Karen, perched on a wooden chair with her laptop balanced precariously on her knees, didn't look up. Her fingers tapped furiously against the keyboard, the sound sharp and staccato. "There wasn't," she replied curtly, her tone carrying an edge. "All the details, the addresses, aliases, histories, they're gone, wiped clean. But—" She paused, glancing up for the first time, her sharp eyes meeting Ashley's. "They left the mugshots." Ashley's brow furrowed, his frustration now tinged with confusion. "Why leave the mugshots? That doesn't make sense." Karen leaned back, exhaling a sigh that carried the weight of sleepless nights and dead-end leads. Her fingers raked through her hair, loosening strands from their meticulous hold. For the first time, her mask of control fractured, revealing the exhaustion beneath. "It doesn't," she muttered, her voice faltering before the words gained weight. "Unless—" She paused, her gaze locking on the wall of faces as if it might answer her unspoken fears. Her eyes traced the photos, the only remnants left untouched in the data wipe. If someone had wanted to erase these people, why leave their faces behind? The thought gnawed at her, digging deep. Her stomach twisted. "What if they didn't leave them behind on purpose?" she said slowly, the realization forming even as she spoke. She sat up straighter, her pulse quickening. "What if they were interrupted?" Ashley straightened from his spot against the counter. "Interrupted?" Karen nodded, eyes narrowing as the pieces clicked into place. Whoever deleted those files wasn't sloppy. They wiped aliases, addresses, personal details, everything that could tie these people to John Doe, but they didn't touch the mugshots. Either they suddenly got careless or— She exhaled sharply, her mind racing, or someone walked in before they could finish. Silence thickened the air. Gabe's frown deepened as he shifted uncomfortably. Ashley ran a hand down his face, exhaling sharply, the weight of the revelation settling between them. Karen's gaze flicked to the evidence board, unease knotting in her gut. "We need to find out who was in the office when those files were being wiped." Ashley grabbed a notepad, scribbling a reminder. "I'll pull access logs and see if anyone came in or out on April 20th at 9:42 p.m. Karen nodded, glancing at Gabe. "We still have a lot of ground to cover, but this changes things. If they got interrupted, that means there's a witness, someone who knows more than they realize." Gabe, who had been pinning a photo to the far end of the board, turned to face her. His ordinarily steady hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the tape holding a map in place. The weight of Karen's implication seemed to thicken the air. "You think it was Kayla?" Ashley asked, his voice quick and sharp, suspicion hanging in the air like a drawn blade. Karen's jaw tightened. "No." Her tone left no room for debate. "We don't always see eye to eye, but she's solid. That's why this whole thing caught me off guard. She wouldn't—" Her voice trailed off, doubt lingering like a shadow in the room. Gabe shoved his hands into his pockets, his gaze shifting between the two of them. If not Kayla, then who? Someone with access to the system, someone who knew exactly what to delete, and someone who almost got caught. "Almost," Karen echoed, her eyes narrowing at the board. "They got away with most of it. But the fact that we have anything left at all." She exhaled slowly. A heavy silence settled over the group. Ashley shifted on his feet, his eyes darting to the board. His frustration simmered just below the surface, but there was something else, something darker. The unspoken acknowledgement that whoever had done this was playing a game they didn't fully understand yet. "Let's focus," Gabe said, his voice cutting through the tension. He grabbed a marker from the counter and stepped closer to the board. "We've got 5 riddles. Let's go through what we've got so far." Karen pushed her chair back and stood, folding her arms across her chest as she joined him. Her sharp gaze moved over the riddles pinned at the center of the board, each one scribbled in Gabe's jagged handwriting. Ashley remained where he was, a silent observer for now, but his presence loomed, the tension rolling off him in waves. "Billionaire's Row," Karen began, pointing to the first riddle. "That one's pretty clear." Ashley scoffed, a dry laugh escaping him. "Clear? Sure, if you think clear means half a dozen skyscrapers and 100 places to hide." Karen shot him a sharp look but didn't respond. Instead, she moved on, her finger tracing the edge of the following note. "Captain Marshall and Michelle Lewis. That one's more opaque." "Opaque," Gabe muttered, rubbing his temple. "More like a flashing neon sign we're still trying to decipher. We know she's his niece, we know he's protecting her, but why?" Karen's gaze lingered on the note, her jaw tightening. "That's the part that's still bothering me," she admitted, her voice quieter now. "Is it just loyalty, family, or is there something deeper we're missing?" Ashley scoffed, arms crossing over his chest. "Protecting your niece from bad press is one thing. Covering up a connection to John Doe, that's a whole different level of dirty." Gabe moved to the next riddle, his fingers tracing the words with the end of his marker. The ink on the paper was slightly smudged, as though someone had run their hand over it, distorting the meaning just enough to feel deliberate. "Buying time," he read aloud, his voice low. 2 silver tokens. What the hell does that mean? Moving against the fridge, Ashley exhaled a slow breath, scratching his armpit. "Parking meter," he muttered, barely looking up. Karen and Gabe both turned toward him. He lifted a shoulder in a half-hearted shrug. "What? It's a guess?" Karen shook her head. "No." The room stilled. Her voice was distant, her gaze unfocused as a memory clawed its way back to the surface. She wasn't here, not in Gabe's apartment, not surrounded by the hum of the fridge and the stale scent of coffee. She was there, in her own home where the air had felt too still, the walls too close. John Doe had sat across from her, his presence like a black hole swallowing the space between them. He had been speaking, taunting, his words a web of calm certainty. But her eyes had locked onto something else entirely. A coin. She could still see it, gleaming as it spun through the air. The metallic flicker catching the dim light, reflecting back something far more unsettling than its polished surface. Over and over it danced between his fingers, the soft clink as it landed in his palm again and again. He had been waiting for her to realize. Karen snapped back into the present with a sharp breath. "It's not a parking meter." Her voice carried an edge now, a note of urgency that hadn't been there before. "It's the coin. He was flipping a coin. It has to be that. There's something about them. John Doe knew it. A heavy silence settled over the room. Gabe exchanged a glance with Ashley before turning to the evidence board, scanning the notes, the photos, the scattered fragments of what they had pieced together so far. His mind raced through everything they had uncovered, John's methods, his obsession with control, the patterns in his words, his choices. A slow chill crept down his spine. "Anything on this board about coins?" Ashley asked. "Or in the book?" Karen moved quickly, sifting through stacks of papers, skimming notes with an intensity that felt almost feverish. Gabe turned, crossing the room in 3 strides to grab the conspiracy text sitting open on the table, the Book of Devon. The pages were delicate, yellowed with age, filled with cryptic symbols and passages that made little sense at first glance. He flipped through, the musty scent of the old paper filling his lungs, until his eyes caught something. A section that hadn't stood out before, one word now glaring at him like a warning. Obols. He exhaled sharply, reading aloud. While obols appear inert to the average mortal, they resonate uniquely with anchors or pillars. This resonance allows the coins to function as mirrors of the soul when near these individuals. However, anchors or pillars themselves may remain unaware of this connection for most of their lives. The obols are not only arbiters of judgment, but also conduits of the dreamer's essence. They collect the accumulated weight of mortal choices, feeding it back into the dreamer during its awakening. This process resets the balance and sets the foundation for a new dreamer cycle. Gabe paused, the weight of the words sinking in. His fingers tightened around the edges of the book. The obols aren't tools for conquest, they're conduits of balance, and attempting to subvert their purpose. He glanced at Karen, then Ashley. Often leads to ruin. The words lingered, thickening the air between them. Ashley let out a low, humorless laugh, rubbing his temples as if trying to ward off a headache. "Have we all gone mad? That doesn't make sense to any sane person." Gabe set the book down with a heavy thud, looking at him. "Maybe that's the point." Ashley scoffed, but something in his expression had shifted. His cynicism hadn't vanished, it never would, but there was something else now. Doubt, or worse, recognition. Karen swallowed, rubbing her arms as though trying to shake off the residual chill of her memory. John Doe didn't just stumble on this, he understands it, he's using it. Gabe nodded, his mind spinning. And if these coins, these obols, are tied to balance, then whatever he's doing, he exhaled. He's trying to unbalance it. Karen's stomach twisted. And that means whatever happens next, it's going to be worse than anything we've seen so far. The 3 of them stood in silence, the weight of the revelation pressing down like a stone. The 3 of them fell into a rhythm, dissecting each riddle with the precision of surgeons, cutting, peeling back layers, exposing every hidden meaning. Words became incisions, phrases turned into stitches binding the pieces together. The room pulsed with the ebb and flow of their momentum, moments of sharp clarity dissolving into dead ends, frustration mounting, only to be beaten back by renewed focus. Karen leaned against the counter, arms folded, her gaze locked onto the evidence wall. The room smelled of dry erase markers, ink-stained fingertips, and the ghost of stale coffee. It was a scent that, under normal circumstances, might have felt familiar, comforting even. But nothing about this felt comfortable. The air buzzed, thick with tension, humming beneath her skin like a low-grade fever. Ashley paced behind her, boots scraping against the linoleum, the rhythmic click-click of his lighter slicing through the silence. It was a habit Gabe had grown used to, a metronome of agitation, but tonight the sound needled at his nerves. "All right," Gabe said finally, his voice cutting through the hum of their thoughts. He stepped toward the wall, marker tapping against a map tacked between scattered mugshots. "Let's work with what we do know." He drew a slow line between the red dots marking key locations across the city. These aren't just places, they're stages, where John Doe found them, where he pulled them into whatever game he's playing. His voice sharpened as he pointed at the first mark. Here, this old 10-story building on 6th? Riley Wilson owned it before the bank seized it. That can't be a coincidence. Ashley stopped pacing, his head tilting slightly. Daniel Broderick's family lives near Roosevelt Plaza, he muttered. And that's on the map, too. Karen exhaled sharply. That gives us 2. She pushed off the counter and approached the board, fingers tracing the remaining red dots. That leaves this cafe, a 24-hour diner, a dive bar on the east side, and an apartment complex 5 blocks from your place, Ashley. She glanced at him. Any of those ring a bell? Ashley let out a breath through his nose, flicking his lighter shut. That bar's a dump. If John Doe was there, he wasn't grabbing cocktails. Gabe's marker hovered over the last red dot. And then there's this. His brow furrowed. Billionaire's Row. But the placement was strange. The dot wasn't pinned to a specific building, not a known address. Instead, it floated in the middle of the street, slightly north of the cluster of luxury high-rises. It felt deliberate, like an unfinished sentence left hanging in the air. Karen frowned, her gaze fixed on the red dot marking Billionaire's Row. That's too precise to be random, but it's not giving us a clear location. Gabe exhaled, rubbing his jaw. Ashley and I checked it out. No clues, just pissed off a doorman. Ashley sighed, rubbing his jaw. So we think we know where he picked them up, but we're not 100%, which means we're still missing something, Gabe finished. His marker tapped against the wall again, slower this time. His voice dropped, thoughtful. John Doe doesn't leave gaps. If something isn't adding up, it's because we're not looking at it the right way. Silence stretched between them. The red dots stared back, a constellation of chaos, waiting for someone to connect the stars in the right sequence. Karen's fingers traced the edge of the evidence board, the cool surface grounding her thoughts as she stared at the photos pinned in a tight cluster. The faces of Patrick Smith, Tony Durrell, Riley Wilson, Jamie Choi, Devin McIntyre, and Daniel Broderick stared back at her. Frozen moments in time, their expressions unknowingly tangled in something far beyond them. We know roughly where he found them, she murmured, her voice carrying the weight of unspoken dread. But why them? Her gaze flicked to the empty space where Michelle Lewis's photo should have been. The outlier, the missing piece. Ashley, mid-pace, stopped cold. His jaw tensed as he studied the board. They're not random, he said, certainty settling into his voice. They can't be. John Doe's too meticulous for that. Gabe stepped in, marker hovering in midair, his mind working through the implications. But what's the connection? His voice was low, deliberate. He traced invisible lines between the suspects, his movements careful as if afraid of what patterns might emerge. Tyrant, lover, guardian, leader, giver, seeker, savior. The words lingered in the air like smoke, curling into something bigger, something ancient. And then it clicked. The book, Gabe breathed, pivoting to the cluttered table where the Book of Devon lay buried beneath loose papers. He grabbed it, fingers moving with urgency as he flipped through the brittle pages, the scent of aged ink and forgotten truths rising like dust from between its covers. The passage stared back at him, stark against the worn paper. To achieve this, a freethinker seeks out 7 individuals who embody the extremes of human depravity and excess, called the sin-bearers. A weight settled in Gabe's chest. His voice remained steady, but there was an unmistakable edge of cold realization as he read aloud. As the words left his mouth, his hand lifted instinctively, pointing at the corresponding faces on the board, one by one, the pieces falling into place. A tyrant who wielded power without mercy, Patrick Smith. A lover whose passion became obsession, Devin McIntyre. A giver whose generosity hid greed, Riley Wilson. A seeker whose curiosity unleashed destruction, Tony Durrell. A savior whose pride condemned those they sought to save, Jamie Choi. That leaves a leader whose ambition consumed nations. Silence hung heavy in the room, a slow, suffocating thing. Karen's pulse thudded in her ears. She had spent years trying to make sense of people like John Doe, murderers, manipulators, men who bent reality to their will. But this wasn't just psychosis. This wasn't just an obsession. This was belief. He planned this, she said, gripping the edge of the table. These weren't just targets. He handpicked them because they fit the roles. Her eyes flicked toward the scattered documents, and suddenly a memory surfaced, one they had almost dismissed. That old, weather-worn page found in John Doe's basement. A list, hundreds of names, crossed out in heavy strokes, one after the other, dozens, then dozens more. But 7 had been circled, not checked, not scratched, circled. He didn't just find them, Karen continued, her voice low with realization. He hunted for them, sifted through lives like files in a drawer, all of them failures, until he found his 7. Gabe's expression darkened. A casting call for monsters. Ashley stepped forward, staring at the board. He hasn't got them all yet, though. His voice was low. Michelle's name, it wasn't crossed out, and it wasn't circled either. Karen's breath caught. Because she's the last one, the final piece. Gabe nodded slowly, which means whatever he's planning, it hasn't happened yet. Ashley dragged a hand through his hair, the realization sinking in like lead. Which means she's still in play. This is what happens, Gabe muttered, almost to himself, when power doesn't answer to consequence. Karen exhaled sharply, pushing off the table and moving to the evidence board. The faces, those goddamn faces, looked different now. Not just names in a case file, not just bodies. They were symbols. They're his ritual. Gabe turned another page, his stomach twisting as he read the final line aloud. A free thinker believes that by binding these 7 souls together in a ritual, they can tear open a rift in reality, a crack in the dreamer's slumbering consciousness. By performing a forbidden chant, he plans to seize control of the dreamer's power and reforge the obols to create a reality shaped entirely by their will. Ashley let out a low curse, stepping back like the words themselves had teeth. Gabe shut the book. The sound echoed too loud in the stillness. Karen swallowed hard, her throat dry. He's not just trying to kill them. She met their eyes, her own sharp and unwavering. He's trying to change the world. A thick silence settled between them, the weight of the realization pressing into their bones. Ashley chimed in, his voice quieter now but carrying the weight of something inevitable. If we're right, if this is all leading somewhere, then stopping him isn't enough. He exhaled sharply, eyes flicking between the evidence wall and the Book of Devon. We need to understand why. If we don't, we'll always be chasing shadows, always one step behind. He dragged a hand down his face, the exhaustion seeping into his movements. We need to find Michelle Lewis. Karen didn't hesitate. She was already moving, sliding into the chair by Gabe's makeshift desk, fingers flying across the keyboard, the glow of the screencast harsh blue shadows against her face, highlighting the tension in her jaw. Seconds bled into minutes, minutes bled into hours. The hum of the computer filled the space, punctuated by the occasional click of keys, the rustle of paper as Gabe skimmed through records, and the flick of Ashley's lighter. A steady, rhythmic sound, like a metronome counting down to something none of them were ready for. She didn't look up. Her eyes locked onto the screen, unblinking, the reflection of an address flickering in her pupils. Then Karen's breath hitched. I found it. Chapter 41, July 13th, 2000, 4:56 p.m. Are we too late? The brownstone stood silent and imposing, its polished brass doorknob catching the last of the sunlight like a challenge. Shadows from the wrought iron railing slashed across the steps, stark and unrelenting, more cage than decoration. Everything about the scene felt staged and rehearsed, too clean, too quiet, like a breath held just before the scream. At the foot of the steps, Gabe stared up at the building as if it might blink first. Beside him, Ashley adjusted his tie without thinking, his eyes sweeping over the shuttered windows, each one sealed tight like a secret. "Nice place," Ashley muttered. "Didn't think ambition lived this clean." Gabe didn't answer. His thoughts were preoccupied with Karen's quiet triumph earlier, finding Michelle Lewis's address after hours of scouring databases and records. Now, standing before the politician-in-waiting's front door, he couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that they were walking into a carefully staged game. Ashley broke the silence, nodding toward the upper windows. "You think she's even home? If she is, try to get a picture when she's not looking. We need it for the board." Gabe didn't hesitate, his eyes locked on the building. "She's home," he said, his tone matter-of-fact. "And trust me, you won't even notice when I take it." He climbed the steps, his shoes scraping against the spotless concrete. Each step felt deliberate, almost like an announcement. This wasn't a neighborhood where unexpected visitors were welcome, especially ones without invitations. He knocked on the door, 3 firm, measured raps. The sound echoed briefly, swallowed quickly by the street's quiet. For a moment, there was nothing but the faint rustle of leaves and the distant hum of traffic. "Maybe she's hiding," Ashley said, his smirk failing to hide his unease. "Or deciding whether we're worth opening the door for," Gabe countered. The sound of approaching footsteps cut through their quiet exchange. Gabe straightened instinctively, and Ashley shifted his weight, his hands brushing the edge of his jacket as if ready to reach for his badge or his gun. The door opened, revealing Michelle Lewis in all her meticulously crafted presence. She leaned against the doorframe, her sharp gaze sweeping over the 2 detectives with the practiced disdain of someone who had spent years perfecting the art of dismissal. Her crisp white blouse and tailored black slacks exuded confidence, but her stance was casual, almost defiant. "Well?" Michelle's voice cut through the quiet like a scalpel, sharp with the grit of Harlem streets and the veneer of an Ivy League education. Her gaze sliced through the 2 detectives as if weighing them on invisible scales, finding them lacking before they even spoke. "Who decided I needed company today?" Ashley tilted his head, his badge already in hand. "Michelle Lewis?" "Depends," she replied, her lips curving into a faint smirk. "What's it to you?" Gabe stepped forward, his tone measured but firm. "Detective Woodward, this is Detective Todd. We're here for a wellness check." Michelle opened the door with the poise of someone used to being in control, but behind the performance was something else, a flicker of hesitation, like a queen unsure of her guards. Her sharp eyes swept over them, dissecting and dismissing them in one fluid glance. "Well?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe as though she had all the time in the world. "Who sent you? A wellness check? You can't be serious." She didn't move from the threshold, posture sharp and rigid, as though daring them to push further. "You two have a lot of nerve showing up here," she began, her tone laced with both irritation and amusement. "What exactly are you checking on? My morning yoga routine, or maybe whether I'm properly hydrated?" "Your safety," Gabe replied evenly, ignoring her sarcasm. "Your name came up in connection to some serious threats." Michelle tilted her head, the faintest smile curling her lips, but her eyes remained intense and tough. "Serious threats?" she repeated, her tone laced with velvet and thorns. "Detectives, I think you've mistaken me for someone who subscribes to conspiracy theories." "We're not talking about subway delays or paparazzi," Ashley said, stepping forward with deliberate calm, his eyes locked onto hers, his presence breaking through her defenses like a tidal surge. "We're talking about your life being in danger." Michelle laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. "Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? My uncle has handled worse than whatever nonsense you're fishing for. He'd crush this whole so-called threat before it even made it to my front door." Ashley raised an eyebrow, leaning slightly closer. "And you're confident he knows everything? That he's always one step ahead?"